Dr. Maria Rodriguez had worked her way up from a small town clinic to become the youngest hospital director at City General Medical Center. At 32, she had earned respect from doctors, nurses, and staff throughout the hospital. Her journey wasn't easy. She had studied late into countless nights, worked double shifts as a resident, and faced her share of challenges along the way. But now, 6 months pregnant with her first child, she was finally ready to enjoy the success she had worked so hard for. Her husband Carlos was a high school math teacher who shared her values of hard work and community service. They had been saving for years to buy their dream home, and when they found the perfect house in Maple Ridge Estates, they knew it was meant to be. The neighborhood was beautiful, with tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, and the kind of peaceful atmosphere they wanted for raising their family. Moving day was exhausting, especially for Maria in her condition. Carlos insisted on doing most of the heavy lifting while she directed the movers and unpacked lighter boxes. They were both excited about this new chapter in their lives. The house had everything they had dreamed of: a spacious kitchen, a cozy living room with a fireplace, and upstairs, a perfect nursery with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. As they were unloading the last boxes from the truck, a woman appeared from the house next door. She was in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that looked expensive. Her smile seemed forced, and there was something about her eyes that made Maria feel uncomfortable right away. "Well, hello there," the woman said, walking up to their driveway with confident steps. "I'm Linda Patterson, president of the Homeowners Association here in Maple Ridge. I live right next door." Maria wiped her hands on her jeans and extended one toward Linda. "Nice to meet you. I'm Maria Rodriguez, and this is my husband Carlos." Linda's handshake was brief and cold. Her eyes quickly scanned Maria from head to toe, lingering on her pregnant belly and then moving to Carlos, who was carrying a box marked "baby clothes" in Spanish. "Rodriguez," Linda repeated slowly, as if testing how the name felt in her mouth. "That's interesting. And you're both planning to live here permanently?" The question caught Maria off guard. "Yes, of course. We just bought the house." "I see." Linda's smile became even more strained. "Well, I hope you understand that we have very strict community standards here in Maple Ridge. Our property values are some of the highest in the city, and we work hard to keep them that way." Carlos set down the box and joined them. "We definitely want to be good neighbors," he said warmly. "We've been looking forward to being part of this community." Linda's gaze shifted to the box Carlos had been carrying. "I hope you're planning to conduct all your household business in English. We've found that it helps maintain the atmosphere of the neighborhood." Maria felt her face flush with anger, but she took a deep breath. She didn't want to start a fight on their first day in their new home. "We're both fluent in English, obviously," she said calmly. "Carlos teaches at Roosevelt High School and I work at the hospital." "Oh, you work at a hospital," Linda said, her tone suggesting this wasn't particularly impressive. "What do you do there? Cleaning? Kitchen staff?" The assumption stung, but Maria kept her composure. "I'm a doctor." Linda's eyebrows raised slightly. "A doctor? Really? What kind of doctor?" "I'm the hospital director at City General." For a moment, Linda's confident expression faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Well, that's surprising. I hope your position there doesn't interfere with your ability to maintain your property according to our HOA standards. We have very specific rules about lawn care, exterior decorations, and acceptable parking arrangements." Over the next few weeks, Linda made her presence known in increasingly irritating ways. She left passive-aggressive notes about their mailbox not being the exact shade of black specified in the HOA handbook. She complained that Carlos parked his 10-year-old Honda Civic in their driveway instead of the garage, claiming it lowered the visual appeal of the street. She even had the audacity to suggest that the small garden gnome Maria's mother had given them as a housewarming gift was not in keeping with the sophisticated aesthetic of the neighborhood. But the worst incidents were the subtle comments Linda made whenever she saw them outside. When Maria was planting flowers in their front yard, Linda mentioned how she hoped they would choose appropriate varieties and not anything too ethnic. When Carlos was grilling burgers in their backyard, Linda commented that she hoped the smell wouldn't be too strong for the neighbors. Maria tried to give Linda the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just very particular about the neighborhood. Maybe she had good intentions but poor social skills. Maria had dealt with difficult people throughout her career, and she prided herself on being able to find common ground with almost anyone. The breaking point came during Maria's 7th month of pregnancy. She was coming home from a doctor's appointment, walking slowly up their front steps when Linda appeared from her yard with a clipboard in hand. "Maria, I need to discuss something with you," Linda announced. "What is it, Linda?" Maria asked, feeling tired and just wanting to get inside. "I've been thinking about your situation," Linda said, gesturing toward Maria's belly. "Have you considered what kind of impact having a baby might have on the neighborhood? Crying at all hours, toys scattered around the yard, the kinds of influences that might be introduced to our community?" Maria stared at her in disbelief. "Are you seriously asking me not to have a baby in my own home? I'm just saying that some neighborhoods are better suited for families with young children. Perhaps somewhere with more diversity would be a better fit for your growing family." That night, Maria told Carlos about the conversation. He was furious and wanted to file a complaint with the city's fair housing office, but Maria convinced him to wait. She was due to go on maternity leave in just a few weeks, and she didn't want the stress of a legal battle while she was preparing for their baby's arrival. "Let's just focus on getting ready for our son," she told Carlos as they painted the nursery, a soft blue color. "After he's born and things settle down, we can decide how to handle Linda." But Linda's behavior only got worse. She started walking by their house multiple times a day, always finding something to criticize. She complained about their sprinkler system watering too early in the morning. She objected to the baby mobile Carlos had hung in the nursery window, claiming it was visual clutter. She even suggested that they should consider hiring a landscaping company instead of doing their own yard work, because certain standards needed to be maintained. Maria began to dread coming home from work. Every day brought a new note, a new complaint, or a new uncomfortable encounter with Linda. She started parking in the garage and using the back entrance to avoid having to deal with her neighbors' constant criticisms. As her due date approached, Maria found herself wondering if they had made a mistake moving to Maple Ridge Estates. The house was perfect and most of their other neighbors seemed friendly enough, but Linda's constant harassment was taking a toll on what should have been a happy time in their lives. Little did Maria know that Linda's interest in their family was about to take a much darker and more dangerous turn. The woman who claimed to care so much about neighborhood standards was already planning something that would go far beyond passive-aggressive notes and uncomfortable conversations. 3 weeks later, Maria woke up at 2 a.m. with sharp pains in her lower back. She had been expecting this moment for months, but now that it was actually happening, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness wash over her. Carlos was already awake, having heard her sharp intake of breath. "Is it time?" he asked, sitting up quickly in bed. Maria nodded, breathing through another contraction. "I think so. The pains are getting stronger and closer together." They had practiced this routine several times. Carlos grabbed the hospital bag they had packed weeks ago while Maria called her doctor. Within an hour, they were driving through the quiet streets toward City General Medical Center, where Maria had spent so many years building her career. It felt strange being wheeled into the hospital as a patient instead of walking through the doors as the director. The night shift nurses recognized her immediately and made sure she was comfortable in the maternity ward. Dr. Patterson, her obstetrician, arrived shortly after and confirmed that Maria was in active labor. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Patterson assured them. "Your baby should be here by morning." The next several hours passed in a blur of contractions, breathing exercises, and Carlos holding her hand through every wave of pain. Maria had delivered countless speeches at medical conferences, made difficult decisions that affected hundreds of employees, and handled crisis situations that would have overwhelmed most people. But nothing had prepared her for the intensity of bringing her first child into the world. At 6:47 a.m., their son was born. The moment the doctor placed the tiny crying baby on Maria's chest, everything else in the world seemed to disappear. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a full head of dark hair, and the most beautiful brown eyes she had ever seen. He's incredible, Carlos whispered, tears streaming down his face as he gently touched his son's tiny hand. They decided to name him Diego, after Maria's grandfather who had always encouraged her to pursue her dreams. As Maria held Diego for the first time, she felt overwhelmed with love and a fierce protective instinct she had never experienced before. The hospital staff gave them privacy to bond with their new baby, and Maria spent the next few hours just staring at Diego's face, memorizing every detail. She noticed a small crescent-shaped birthmark on his left shoulder, about the size of a dime. It looked like a tiny moon, and she found herself gently tracing it with her finger while he slept. Later that morning, as Maria was resting and Carlos had gone home to shower and grab some fresh clothes, she was surprised to see a familiar figure walking past her room. Linda Patterson was in the hallway, wearing a volunteer badge and carrying a clipboard. Maria blinked several times, wondering if the pain medication was making her see things. But no, it was definitely Linda. She was talking to one of the nurses at the station, gesturing toward the nursery and asking questions about hospital procedures. Maria felt confused and uncomfortable. What was Linda doing at her hospital? When the nurse came to check on Maria a few minutes later, she asked about it. "Oh, that's Linda Patterson," the nurse explained. "She started volunteering here about 2 weeks ago. She said she wanted to help out in the maternity ward, especially with paperwork and family coordination." Maria frowned. She knew every volunteer program at the hospital, and there was no position that matched what the nurse had described. As the director, she would have had to approve any new volunteer roles, especially ones that involved access to sensitive areas like the maternity ward. "I think there might be some confusion," Maria said carefully. "I'm not familiar with that volunteer position." The nurse looked puzzled. "Really? She seemed to know a lot about hospital policies. She even had all the right badges and paperwork." Before Maria could investigate further, Diego woke up and needed to be fed. She pushed her concerns about Linda to the back of her mind, focusing instead on learning how to care for her newborn son. The nurses taught her how to change diapers, how to recognize when Diego was hungry, and how to support his head properly when holding him. That afternoon, while Maria was napping and Diego was sleeping in the bassinet beside her bed, Linda appeared in her doorway. She was still wearing the volunteer badge and had the same clipboard in her hands. "Congratulations," Linda said, her voice carrying that same fake sweetness Maria had grown to recognize. "I heard you had your baby." "Thank you," Maria replied cautiously. "I didn't know you volunteered here." Linda smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I believe in giving back to the community. There are so many families here who need guidance and support during such an important time." She stepped closer to Diego's bassinet and peered down at the sleeping baby. "He's beautiful. Such a peaceful little angel." Something about the way Linda was looking at Diego made Maria uncomfortable. There was an intensity in her gaze that seemed inappropriate for someone who was supposed to be just a volunteer. "I've been thinking about what we discussed before," Linda continued, her eyes still fixed on Diego. "About making sure children end up in the right situations. Sometimes babies are born into circumstances that aren't ideal, and sometimes there are families who could provide better opportunities." Maria sat up straighter in her hospital bed. "What are you talking about, Linda?" "Oh, just general observations," Linda said casually. "I've seen so many cases where babies might be better off with different families. Families who can provide the right kind of environment, the right kind of influences." The implication of Linda's words hit Maria like a cold wave. She reached over and pulled Diego's bassinet closer to her bed. "Linda, I think you should leave, now," Maria said firmly. But Linda didn't seem to hear her. She was still staring at Diego with that strange, intense expression. "He really is beautiful. Look at those features. He could fit in anywhere, really. Some babies are just more adaptable than others." "I said you need to leave," Maria repeated, her voice getting louder. Finally, Linda seemed to snap out of whatever trance she had been in. She looked at Maria with that fake smile again. Of course, I'm sure you need your rest. I'll be around if you need anything. The maternity ward can be such a busy place, especially during shift changes. So many people coming and going, it's hard to keep track of everything that's happening. After Linda left, Maria felt deeply unsettled. She called the head nurse and asked about Linda's volunteer status, but the nurse insisted that everything had been properly approved. Maria made a mental note to investigate this further once she was back at work. That evening, Carlos returned with flowers and balloons, and Maria tried to push her worries aside. They spent the evening taking turns holding Diego, marveling at how tiny his fingernails were and laughing when he made funny faces in his sleep. I can't believe he's really ours, Carlos said, gently rocking Diego while Maria ate dinner. I know, Maria agreed. I keep thinking someone's going to tell us this is all a dream. But even as she said it, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Linda's visit had left her with a sense of unease that she couldn't quite explain. The way Linda had looked at Diego, the strange comments about babies and families, and most concerning of all, Linda's mysterious volunteer position that Maria was certain didn't actually exist. As they prepared to spend their second night in the hospital, Maria made sure Diego's bassinet was positioned right next to her bed where she could see him at all times. She had worked too hard and waited too long for this moment to let anything threaten the happiness she had finally found. 2 days later, Maria and Carlos brought Diego home from the hospital. The drive back to Maple Ridge Estates should have been one of the happiest moments of their lives. They had their perfect baby boy, they were healthy, and they were finally starting their life as a family. But something felt wrong from the moment they pulled into their driveway. Diego had been fussy during the car ride, which the pediatrician had said was completely normal. But his cry sounded different somehow. Maria couldn't put her finger on what exactly had changed. But after carrying him for 9 months and spending 2 days listening to every sound he made, she knew something was off. Maybe he's just tired from the trip, Carlos suggested as they got Diego settled in his nursery. The doctor said babies can be cranky when their routine changes. Maria wanted to believe that was all it was, but her instincts were telling her otherwise. She had always been good at reading people and situations. It was part of what made her successful as a hospital director. And right now, every fiber of her being was screaming that something was wrong. That first night at home was rough. Diego seemed restless and uncomfortable. He would fall asleep for 20 or 30 minutes, then wake up crying. His feeding schedule was completely different from what it had been at the hospital. Maria found herself walking the floors at 3 in the morning, trying to soothe a baby who seemed like a stranger. This isn't normal, she told Carlos as the sun started to rise. Something's not right. Carlos rubbed her back gently. Honey, you're exhausted. We both are. Maybe you're just overthinking things because we're first-time parents. But Maria couldn't shake the feeling. Over the next day, she noticed more things that didn't add up. Diego's sleeping position was different. At the hospital, he had always curled up on his right side, but now he seemed to prefer his left. His reaction to light was different too. And most disturbing of all, when Maria went to change his diaper and saw his bare shoulder, her heart nearly stopped. The crescent-shaped birthmark was gone. Maria stared at Diego's left shoulder in disbelief. She had memorized that birthmark, traced it with her finger dozens of times during their 2 days in the hospital. It had been there every time she had changed his diaper, every time she had dressed him, every time she had bathed him. She knew exactly where it was supposed to be, and it wasn't there. Carlos, she called, her voice shaking. Come here right now. He rushed into the nursery, seeing the panic on her face. What's wrong? Look at his shoulder, Maria said, pointing to where the birthmark should have been. Where's his birthmark? Carlos examined Diego's shoulder carefully. What birthmark? I don't remember a birthmark. The crescent-shaped one, right here, Maria insisted, touching the spot where it should have been. It was about the size of a dime. I showed it to you at the hospital. Carlos looked confused and concerned. Maria, are you sure? I mean, maybe it was just a temporary mark from the delivery? But Maria knew what she had seen. She had been a doctor for years, and she knew the difference between a birthmark and a temporary mark. That crescent moon had been a permanent part of her son's skin, and now it was gone. Her hands were shaking as she picked up Diego and examined him more closely. His hair seemed slightly lighter. His ear shape looked different. Even the way he held his hands when he slept wasn't the same. "This isn't our baby," she whispered. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Carlos stared at her with a mixture of concern and disbelief. "Maria, what are you saying?" "Of course this is our baby. We brought him home from the hospital. You're just tired and stressed." But Maria was already moving, her medical training and director instincts kicking in. She grabbed her phone and started making calls. First, she called Dr. Patterson, their obstetrician, but got his voicemail. Then she called the head nurse in the maternity ward. "This is Dr. Rodriguez," she said when the nurse answered. "I need you to pull all the security footage from the maternity ward for the past 3 days. Something's happened to my baby." The nurse sounded confused. "Dr. Rodriguez, what do you mean? Is Diego okay?" "That's just it," Maria said, pacing around the nursery while holding the baby who might not be Diego at all. "I don't think this is Diego." Within an hour, Maria and Carlos were back at City General Medical Center with the baby. Maria had called ahead and arranged for several staff members to meet them, including the head of security and the chief of staff. She also requested that they contact the police. "I know this sounds crazy," Maria explained to the assembled group in the conference room, "but I'm telling you, this is not my baby. My son had a birthmark on his left shoulder. This baby doesn't." My son's cry was different, his sleeping patterns were different, everything about him was different. The head of security, Tom Williams, had worked with Maria for 5 years and respected her judgment. "Dr. Rodriguez, if you're saying there's been some kind of mix-up, we need to take this seriously. Let's look at that security footage." They spent the next 2 hours going through video from every camera in the maternity ward. Maria's heart was pounding as they watched the footage from her room, the nursery, and the hallways. At first, everything looked normal. Nurses coming and going, doctors making rounds, families visiting. Then they saw it. At 2:47 a.m. on their second night in the hospital, during the shift change when the hallways were mostly empty, Linda Patterson appeared on camera. She was wearing scrubs instead of her volunteer clothes, and she had a security badge that Maria definitely hadn't authorized. Linda moved confidently through the maternity ward like she belonged there. The cameras showed Linda entering the nursery when only one nurse was on duty. The nurse was at the far end of the room checking on another baby. Linda went straight to the section where Diego and 2 other newborns were sleeping. For several minutes, the camera angle made it impossible to see exactly what she was doing. But when Linda left the nursery 10 minutes later, she was carrying a baby carrier covered with a blanket. "Stop the tape," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Go back and zoom in on that timestamp." They watched the sequence again, and this time they could see more clearly. Linda had somehow switched Diego with another baby, a baby who belonged to a teenage mother in a different room, a mother who had been planning to place her child for adoption. The room fell silent as the implications hit everyone at once. Linda Patterson, their HOA president and supposed hospital volunteer, had stolen Maria's baby and replaced him with another child. "We need to call the police immediately," Tom said, reaching for his phone. "Wait," Maria said, her mind racing. "We need to find out where she took Diego first, and we need to locate the mother of this baby." She looked down at the infant in her arms, feeling a complex mix of emotions. This child was innocent in all of this, and his real mother was probably worried sick. "Dr. Rodriguez," the chief of staff said gently, "we need to handle this very carefully. If what we're seeing is accurate, this is kidnapping. This is a federal crime." Maria nodded, but her thoughts were focused on only one thing: getting Diego back safely. She had no idea what Linda was planning or where she had taken her son, but she was determined to find out. As the hospital director, she had resources and authority that Linda had probably never counted on. The game was about to change, and Linda Patterson was about to discover that she had picked the wrong family to target. Within 30 minutes, the hospital conference room had transformed into a command center. Police officers, hospital security, social workers, and FBI agents filled the space. Maria sat at the head of the table, still holding the baby who wasn't. Diego, her mind sharp despite the emotional turmoil she was experiencing. Detective James Morrison, a veteran officer who specialized in crimes against children, took charge of the situation. Dr. Rodriguez, I need you to walk me through everything you remember about this woman, Linda Patterson. Every interaction, every conversation, no matter how small it might seem. Maria took a deep breath and began recounting the months of harassment. The strange comments about babies and families, and Linda's mysterious appearance at the hospital as a volunteer. As she spoke, she could see the detective's expression growing more serious. This wasn't a random act, Detective Morrison said. This was planned. She's been watching your family for months, learning your routines, and somehow she managed to get access to the hospital's most secure areas. Carlos, who had been quiet throughout the briefing, finally spoke up. But why? Why would she do this to us? What could she possibly gain from stealing our baby? The FBI agent, Special Agent Jennifer Hayes, looked up from her notes. Based on what Dr. Rodriguez has told us about the harassment and the comments about appropriate families, this appears to be a hate crime with a child trafficking component. She may have believed she was correcting what she saw as an inappropriate situation. The words made Maria's blood run cold. Linda hadn't just stolen Diego on impulse. She had planned this because she didn't think Maria and Carlos deserved to raise their own child. We need to find the real mother of this baby too, Maria said, gently rocking the infant in her arms. She has no idea what's happened to her son. The social worker, Mrs. Chen, nodded. We've already located her. Her name is Rebecca Miller. She's 17 years old and she's been frantic. She gave birth 2 days ago and was planning to place the baby for adoption through the hospital's approved agency. When she went to say goodbye to him this morning before the adoption proceedings, the nurses couldn't find him anywhere. She's been crying for hours, Mrs. Chen continued. The nurses thought there had been a paperwork mix-up, or that the adoption agency had picked him up early. No one realized he had been taken. Detective Morrison was already coordinating with his team. We have Linda Patterson's address from the HOA records. We're going to execute a search warrant immediately. Dr. Rodriguez, I need you to stay here, at the hospital where it's safe, but we'll need you available for identification once we locate your son. But Maria wasn't about to sit and wait. I'm coming with you, she said firmly. Ma'am, I understand your urgency, but this could be a dangerous situation. We don't know how she'll react when she's cornered. Detective Morrison, Maria said, standing up and using the authoritative voice that had served her well as a hospital director. Linda Patterson targeted my family because she thought I was powerless. She thought she could steal my child and get away with it because she saw me as less than her. But what she doesn't know is that I'm the director of this hospital, I have resources, and I'm not backing down. I'm coming with you and I'm getting my baby back. The detective studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but you stay in the car until we secure the scene. The drive to Maple Ridge Estates felt surreal. Just 4 days ago, Maria had been excited about bringing Diego home to this neighborhood. Now she was returning in a police convoy to confront the woman who had stolen her child. As they pulled up to Linda's house, Maria could see that all the lights were on, even though it was the middle of the afternoon. The perfectly manicured lawn and pristine exterior looked exactly the same as always, but now it felt sinister rather than impressive. Detective Morrison and his team approached the front door while Maria waited in the unmarked police car with Agent Hayes. Through the radio, she could hear the officers announcing themselves and demanding entry. Police, open the door, we have a warrant. For several long minutes there was no response. Then, finally, they heard Linda's voice through the door. I don't know what you're talking about. There's been some mistake. Ma'am, we have video evidence. Open the door now or we're coming in. When Linda finally opened the door, Maria could see her clearly through the car window. Her perfectly styled hair was messy, her expensive clothes were wrinkled, and her face looked pale and panicked. This wasn't the confident, controlling woman who had been terrorizing their family for months. Where is the baby, Linda? Detective Morrison asked immediately. What baby? I don't have any baby. But even as she said it, they could all hear the sound of an infant crying from somewhere inside the house. That's him, Maria whispered, her heart racing. That's Diego's cry. The officers moved past Linda into the house, following the sound. Maria could see Linda's face crumble as she realized her plan had fallen apart. Within minutes, Officer Rodriguez emerged from the house carrying a baby carrier. Maria was out of the police car before Agent Hayes could stop her. She ran toward the officer, and when he pulled back the blanket, she saw Diego's face. Her son was crying, but he was alive and appeared to be unharmed. Diego, she whispered, taking him from the officer and holding him close. She immediately checked his left shoulder and felt a wave of relief when she saw the crescent-shaped birthmark exactly where it should be. As she held her real son for the first time in over 24 hours, she could hear Linda being arrested behind her. "You don't understand," Linda was saying to the officers. "I was trying to help. That baby deserves better opportunities. That family can't provide the right environment." Detective Morrison was reading Linda her rights, but she continued talking. "Do you know who I am? I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. I've been trying to maintain the standards of this community. Someone had to do something." "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," the detective said firmly. "I strongly suggest you use it." But Linda seemed unable to stop talking. Years of believing she was superior to everyone around her had made her unable to comprehend that she had committed a serious crime. "This is ridiculous. I was helping that child. He doesn't belong with those people." Maria turned to face Linda, still holding Diego protectively in her arms. "Those people?" she said, her voice steady despite her anger. "I'm the director of the hospital where you committed your crime. I'm the person who's going to make sure you face the full consequences of what you've done." For the first time since Maria had known her, Linda Patterson was completely speechless. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. She had kidnapped the baby of one of the most powerful people at the city's largest hospital, and her crime had been captured on multiple security cameras. As the police car drove away with Linda in handcuffs, Maria stood in the driveway of the house where this nightmare had started, holding Diego close and feeling a mix of relief, anger, and determination. The ordeal wasn't over yet. There would be court proceedings, investigations, and a long recovery process for both families involved. But for now, Diego was safe in her arms, and Linda Patterson would never be able to hurt another family again. 6 months later, Maria stood in the federal courthouse wearing her best navy blue suit, holding Diego in her arms as she prepared to give her victim impact statement. The past half year had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and healing for both families affected by Linda Patterson's crime. The case had made national headlines. Hospital director's baby stolen by racist neighbor had been the story that dominated news cycles for weeks. Reporters had camped outside their house, legal experts had debated the case on television, and social media had exploded with outrage over Linda's actions. But through it all, Maria had remained focused on two things: making sure Linda faced appropriate consequences for her crime, and using this terrible experience to create positive change that would protect other families. The investigation had revealed the full scope of Linda's planning. She had spent weeks studying the hospital's security protocols, had forged volunteer credentials, and had even researched the adoption procedures to understand when babies would be most vulnerable. Most disturbing of all, investigators found a detailed journal in Linda's house where she had written about her plans to improve the community by ensuring babies went to appropriate families. She had been planning this for months, Detective Morrison had explained to Maria during one of their meetings. She saw your pregnancy as an opportunity to act on beliefs she'd been harboring for years. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was calculated and premeditated. The legal proceedings had been complex. Linda was charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, hate crimes, fraud, and identity theft. Her lawyer had tried to argue that she was mentally unstable, but the evidence of careful planning made that defense impossible to sustain. During the trial, the prosecution had called numerous witnesses who testified about Linda's pattern of harassment and discriminatory behavior. Neighbors came forward to share stories of Linda's inappropriate comments about families she deemed unsuitable for the neighborhood. Former HOA members testified about her attempts to create rules that would effectively exclude certain types of families from moving to Maple Ridge Estates. The most powerful testimony came from Rebecca Miller, the teenage mother whose baby had been used in Linda's scheme. Rebecca had kept her son after all, deciding that the trauma of nearly losing him had shown her how much she truly wanted to be his mother. "I was 17 and scared," Rebecca had said through tears on the witness stand. "I thought adoption was the right choice because I didn't know if I could provide everything my baby needed. But when I thought I had lost him forever, I realized that the most important thing I could give him was love, and I have plenty of that." Rebecca and Maria had become close friends during the legal process. Despite their age difference and different backgrounds, they had bonded over the shared experience of nearly losing their children to the same person's twisted beliefs. Rebecca often brought her son Tyler to visit Diego, and the two boys had become like cousins. Now, as Maria approached the podium to address the court, she thought about all the families who had supported them through this ordeal. The hospital staff had rallied around them, implementing new security measures to ensure nothing like this could happen again. The Maple Ridge Estates neighborhood had elected a new HOA board and had issued a formal apology to Maria and Carlos. Most importantly, they had found a new community of people who valued diversity and inclusion. "Your Honor," Maria began, looking directly at Linda, who sat at the defendant's table looking small and defeated. "6 months ago, Linda Patterson tried to destroy my family because she believed that people who look like me don't deserve the same rights and opportunities as people who look like her. She stole my newborn baby because she thought her prejudices gave her the right to decide what was best for my child." Diego gurgled softly in her arms, and Maria smiled down at him before continuing. But what Linda didn't understand is that hate never wins in the end. Her actions brought our community together in ways she never could have imagined. They led to new friendships, stronger hospital security, and important conversations about discrimination that needed to happen. Maria's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I'm not here today asking for revenge. I'm here asking for justice. Linda Patterson committed serious crimes that could have resulted in permanent separation of families and lasting trauma for children. She needs to face consequences that reflect the severity of her actions." The judge, the Honorable Patricia Williams, had been listening intently throughout the trial. When it came time for sentencing, her words were clear and firm. "Mrs. Patterson, your actions represent one of the most disturbing cases of targeted harassment and child endangerment I have seen in my 20 years on the bench. You planned and executed the kidnapping of an infant, based purely on racial prejudice and a misguided belief that you had the right to determine which families deserved to raise their own children." Linda's lawyer had asked for leniency, arguing that she was a first-time offender and a pillar of the community. But Judge Williams wasn't swayed. "The evidence shows that you spent months planning this crime. You forged credentials, violated hospital security, and traumatized multiple families. Your actions put 2 innocent children at risk and caused immeasurable pain to their parents. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation." As the gavel came down, Maria felt a mix of relief and closure. It wasn't about celebrating Linda's punishment. It was about knowing that justice had been served and that Linda would never be able to hurt another family. After the sentencing, Maria and Carlos decided to move to a different neighborhood, not because they were running away from what had happened, but because they wanted to start fresh in a community that truly welcomed diversity. They found a beautiful house in Riverside Heights, where their neighbors included families from many different backgrounds and cultures. Maria returned to work at City General Medical Center with a renewed sense of purpose. She used her experience to spearhead a complete overhaul of hospital security protocols, ensuring that no unauthorized person could ever again gain access to sensitive areas like the maternity ward. She also established a new program to support families who had experienced trauma, providing counseling and resources for parents and children affected by crimes. The media attention from the case had given Maria a platform she had never expected. She began speaking at conferences about discrimination in healthcare and the importance of protecting vulnerable families. She worked with legislators to strengthen laws against hate crimes targeting families and children. Diego grew into a happy, healthy toddler who loved playing with his friend Tyler during their regular playdates. Both children were too young to understand what had happened to them, but Maria was determined to raise Diego with an understanding of justice, equality, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Rebecca finished her high school diploma and started college classes while working part-time at the hospital in the administrative office. Maria had helped her get the job, and Rebecca had proven to be a dedicated and capable employee. She was studying to become a social worker, inspired by her experience to help other young families navigate difficult situations. On the first anniversary of Diego's birth, Maria and Carlos threw a big party in their new backyard. Rebecca and Tyler were there, along with all the hospital staff who had helped them through the crisis, the police officers who had investigated the case, and their new neighbors who had become close friends. As Maria watched Diego take his first, wobbly steps across the grass while surrounded by people who loved and supported their family, she realized that Linda Patterson's attempt to tear them down had actually made them stronger. They had found their true community, built lasting friendships, and created positive change that would protect other families for years to come. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the most meaningful victories. And for Maria's family, that victory was measured not in Linda's punishment but in the love, support, and positive change that had grown from their determination to fight back against hate.